Thank you and welcome to the show today. The topic this morning is a profile on Mr. William Warfield. And we have in the studio with us to give us a profile, Mr. William Warfield. And Mr. Warfield, let me welcome you to the show this morning.
Thank you.
And to thank you for coming by and giving us an opportunity to talk to you about some of the things that you've been involved in over the last many years. As a matter of fact, Mr. Warfield, what we'd like to do today is to talk about William Warfield as a concert singer, and to give you an opportunity to talk about your background, your education, your experiences, and some of the things that were important and eventually leading you to the position in which you're in now. And at the same time, to give us some information about Duke Ellington and some of the other things that you've been involved in your career. Let's start it off by having you to talk about your background, your education, and that kind of information, and then we'll talk about other things.
Well, I come from I'm a PK, preacher's kid, and I come from a very strict Baptist background, although my father was very ecumenical in his approach. We visited other churches, other denominations, and all of that. So it was not that we were just in a straitjacket about it, but we were sort of on the conservative side. We were Baptist. And I was raised in the church. In fact, when I started music for the first time, I was taking piano lessons with the lady who was the organist of our church. I was 9 years old, and I didn't really start singing much till I was about 16 after my voice had changed, and I just started singing one day in high school, and I was a baritone. And but even then, my first love was piano. My first ambition was to be a teacher. I remember my father had people come in all the time, and if it was a professor so-and-so, he's a teacher, you know, and that to me was just the thing to be a teacher. And I wanted to go to get my degree, and I wanted to get a master's degree, because I figured that at that point, back in those days, that was in 1938, a master's degree would have assured you more or less a position in a university. Not anymore, of course. Even doctors don't assure you that anymore, because of the level of degrees now. But it was not until actually I won a competition in 1938 at the Music Educators National Convention out in St. Louis that I decided to pursue singing as such. But even then I was pursuing music from the standpoint of teaching. And I only really decided to try it as a career once I had gotten about a year's experience on the road in something that was called Call Me Mister. It was a road show, a big Broadway hit. And I decided, well, I think I'll go back to New York and see if I can make a career of that. Got back in New York in 1947, and then got into several things, bit parts, and by 1950 made my concert debut. And that is what started me on the way to a career. And I must say that nowadays, a concert career as such is practically out of the question, because the old days of the concerts doesn't exist anymore like it did. But in fact, during that time, the only thing that was open to us as blacks was the concert field.
I was about to raise that question, Mr. Warfield. What really motivated you to talk about going into concert music at this particular time?
Well, number one, it was, for instance, being raised in the church, and we automatically were into concert type music, because my father being a Baptist minister, you know, the old days jazz and all of that stuff was considered sinful. And so when I started studying music, it was always with anthems in church and spirituals and things like that. And my orientation was for serious music rather than jazz. I mean, in fact, as a teenager, I learned to play piano, and my father said no son of his would ever play in a nightclub, you know, because that had the sting of sin to it, you know. So, but I actually was singing anthems and spirituals and things in church, and then when I got into high school, I was in the music classes and doing things. So it was just a natural step for me to go into the classical field rather than into jazz or even popular music. And it just so happened that if I was to be in classical music, my idols were, number one, Roland Hayes, who came on the scene. It was Paul Robeson, and then Marian Anderson, and then Dorothy Maynor. And these people were, to me, my idols. They were the people that I wanted to sing like or have a career like. Paul Robeson more as the man and what he represented, and Marian Anderson as the extreme vocal artist, and of course Roland Hayes, who was the first one of us that really made inroads into classical music with his singing in Europe and German, French, Italian, the whole bit. And that's where my interest started, and then they continued right straight through, and finally I became had my concert debut. Now what happened after that is a tremendous change. I was thrown into the limelight, and then a movie came, Showboat, and Old Man River, and international visibility, then Porgy and Bess, the folk opera. And by the time opera opened its doors to blacks was not until the mid-50s. And if you remember, even then, Rudolph Bing let Marian Anderson, as a token, be the first to do Ulrika in the masked ball. And that was in the mid-50s. But by that time, my career was pretty well started into classical music, opera, not opera, but oratorio, appearances with orchestras, the movie, Porgy and Bess. And so I never really embraced opera totally, but of course, we've been on the fringes of it and had done what we call concert versions of things. I even did a concert version of Aida and a concert version of Boris Godunov in Russian and things like that. But my main field remained concerts and anything related to the theater.
As a concert singer, what is the, well, I don't guess there is an average day, but how do you go about your day in preparation? I mean, how do you go about preparing for your next concert or what? I mean,
well,
give us
number one,
of,
there's a tremendous amount of preparation for a concert or an operatic career. Right now, when youngsters come to me, they're really training to be opera stars because nowadays, if you have a reputation in opera, then you can do as many concerts as you please. Take a person like Pavarotti, who's the world tenor. It's because of opera, and he can fill a stadium for a concert after that. But then he did not go into his career to do concert. It was opera, and opera is the big thing. In this country now, for instance, we used to have just a few cities that had opera houses, and now there are opera houses all over, everywhere. Dallas, you name it, have opera coming up. And there is talent with the youngsters who are training for this, black and white. And that's where the big emphasis is now. But when I came along, especially for blacks, it was the concert field, and as I said, people like Marian Anderson, Paul Robeson, Roland Hayes were our models.
Very good. And of course, we're coming up, Mr. Warfield, to our first commercial break within the next minute. And this is the information that we wanted you to give us about your background and your education and your experiences and et cetera. And of course, after we have our first commercial break, we'll talk about some other aspects of your life. More specifically, we'll talk about some of the real reasons that perhaps brought you to town today, and that has to do with the 100th anniversary of the celebration of Duke Ellington's birthday. And I'm sure that you've got a lot of statements to make in reference to that.
Oh, sure.
And we've got about 30 seconds coming up, and we didn't want to start you talking about the 100th anniversary, then at the same time have to break that up. But that's essentially what we want to do. We want to try, and I think you're giving us essentially what we sought to achieve, and that is a fairly good idea of the man himself, Mr. Warfield. And of course, we'll take this first commercial break, and we'll be back with you following this commercial break. He's given us a profile